Today, on Be Something Wonderful, how your invisible assumptions create it all. I am your host, Tom Karen, and this is the Be Something Wonderful studio of higher consciousness, where we help you level up and become the best version of yourself. Creators, welcome back. I heard from one of you that said that you ran in to your SP, and your SP was with somebody. And this is what you said. I saw my SP out with another guy. And you said this seemed to happen out of the blue. We're going to get to that in a minute. But I didn't react. Now, weeks later, things still seem the same. And you use the word seem here. So what are we talking about here? Well, first of all, I want to say that nothing happens out of the blue. So I really want to say that you've been carrying that event within you, right? You had an assumption, right? Remember, everything's based, it's an assumptive world, as Neville Goddard talks about, as we'll get to in a few minutes. But hear this, it's not, and you're saying that you didn't react, but I really want to get to this today, and this is big. We're going to really do a deep dive into this stuff. It's not just about reacting or not reacting to what you physically see in space or time, or to what is right in front of you in time. Right? So hear this. Reaction is not about what you physically see in space or what is right in front of you in time. The event or reality is still with you, although you can't see it in space and time. Hear this. And not only is it still with you weeks later, but it was with you before it even happened. Otherwise, it couldn't happen. It couldn't be in your existence. It couldn't be part of your experience. Do you hear this? You are carrying that image, that reality within you. Otherwise, it wouldn't project or happen in the 3D world, and you're still carrying it with you, right? It's not just as a memory, but as a reality in time, right? You're carrying, and I'm saying it's not just a memory, but it's an imprint. A metaphysical imprint that you're carrying with you. If you want it, and if you even went to that location or space, they would still be there. You couldn't see them, but the metaphysical reality is still there. Do you hear this? And you're carrying that with you. The space would still carry the mental impression of the event. Why? Because you're carrying the mental impression of the event in space and time, right? And this really, a lot of this comes from the teachings of Jane Roberts and through Seth, right? And Seth talks about a doll that was on a dresser that got broken and that the little kid throws away, but really was attached to that doll, was really had a connection to that doll, but that doll still exists, and it's still on that dresser, right? And even though in space and time it looks like it isn't, that's your connection right here. Do you hear this? So it didn't happen out of the blue, and you're saying things still seem the same. Well, you're looking through your physical eyes. Right? And you're right. Things are the same, right? Because you're still carrying that memory with it, which is an image, but it's a metaphysical image. It's more than what we call just a memory, right? We dismiss memories as not important, but they are important, right? And why? Because that is a reality in time and space right now. Let's really peel this back and unpack this today. So here's what I really want to say, is that even behind all that, you have an assumption, you're holding as a truth that can happen, that your SP can be with somebody else, that you don't get your dreams, right? That wish fulfilled doesn't happen. That's your assumption. That comes from that true assumption or concept of yourself, right? Remember, all your dreams already have come true for your soul. So you want to base your assumptions on who you really are. And I'm going to get to this in a few minutes. Here's what Neville says. What you see when you look at something depends not so much on what is there as the assumption you make when you look. Do you hear this? So as you looked, you've already had that assumption within you that it's possible that she could be with another guy. Or he could be, I think it's he could be with another guy. Yeah, that your SP could be with, exactly, that your SP could be with another guy. You made that assumption, right? What you see when you look at something depends not so much on what is there as the assumption you make when you look. You had that assumption that that's possible. That it's not only possible, that it's a reality, and you've been carrying that reality around with you, and you're still carrying it around with you. That's why things haven't changed. Wow, right? What you see when you look at something depends not so much on what is there as the assumption you make when you look. What you believe to be the physical world is actually only an assumptive world. Neville lays it out with us through the law of assumption here. Right? And that was your assumption. It's an assumptive world. Remember, there's a deeper knowing that you have, right? It's a deeper feeling of fulfillment that's within you that you're not accessing because you're letting these sort of surface assumptions, that's what I want to call them, although you believe they're truths. Right? So again, we think they're deep down in our subconscious. They're not. It's obvious what's going on here. And you can see it. So we always want to separate conscious, subconscious, deeper consciousness. Consciousness is consciousness. And you're seeing through the eyes of ego, and you're seeing through the eyes of that surface, those surface assumptions, when within you is a deeper knowing that all your dreams come true, that you are fulfilled. That's what we want to talk about today, right? So what you believe to be real physical world is actually only an assumptive world. And then Neville says, believing and being are one. So whatever you believe through those assumptions, that's who you're being. And what you're being is what your reality will reveal to you, right? And as they were going, they were cleansed. So I want to go to this. Neville mentions this in his quotes here. He points to scripture when Jesus healed 10 lepers. It's the parable of 10 lepers. And what he told them is go and present yourself to the medic. The medic could declare the lepers clean, or the priest. The priests in those days were also medics. And the priest could declare the lepers clean, right? But they had to go and see them. So it was their, and then it says, as they went to see the priest, to have that declaration that they were healed, they were cleansed. They were healed as they walked in that faith. They were healed as they as they walked in that assumption that they were healed. Do you hear this, right? As they walked, they were cleansed. Your faith is your assumption, right? And so what you look at, when you look at something, you're looking at it through those assumptions, through that faith, and that's what you see. Wow, that's big. Let's unpack this a little bit more. Think of the physical 3D events and conditions as real-time feedback. Hear this. They're real. So as you look, you're getting feedback on your assumptions, your beliefs, your state of being, but it's real-time. So as you look, you can change it. So you are reacting as you look. Otherwise, the event would vanish. It would go away as you pull your attention from it, or it would change as you change your feelings about it. Do you hear this, right? And that feedback is constantly changing as you look at it. Do you hear this? The 3D reality is not as solid as you think. It's in a constant state of change. Right? The only thing that doesn't change is that I am awareness behind it, that God behind it, right? Many of these changes are subtle and invisible until they are not. So you stared at them, right? I know it wasn't like staring. I'm not talking about physically staring. I mean inner awareness, right? Your inner awareness was staring at them long before you even saw them in physical reality. You were carrying that. But you could have changed that at any moment before you saw them and as you were looking at them physically, and as you were putting your attention on them, and as you walked away, right? Because your inner attention is still on it. The blueprint's still there, right? The metaphysical blueprint's still there, right? Many of these changes are subtle and invisible until they're not. So you're looking out through your physical eyes saying nothing has changed. But it's always changing. It's just changing into the same assumptions, the same state of being that you're assuming, right? Your inner reality formed by your thoughts, feelings, and mental images and assumptions is always materializing in 3D reality at every moment. You get a chance to change it at every moment. Nothing's fixed, nothing's solid, no facts are final. You get to change it as you're, quote, looking. Not only physically, but that inner awareness, that inner attention. Let's break this down a little bit more. Even those circumstances and conditions that seem so solid, real, and unchangeable, like seeing your SP with a guy, right? You are changing constantly in real time based on your assumptions, those thoughts, feelings, and attitudes toward them, right? And these are more your surface attitudes and your surface assumptions, though, because within you is a knowing, a fulfillment that doesn't change, a joy, a love. It's that core energy or that core of who you are that doesn't change. But everything else is changing. So you can reach within and tap into those core assumptions and change your reality from the unwanted. Right? So your entire 3D experience originates within you. You draw it all to you by you. It is drawn to you through you, right? And by you. No one can come to me, and this is what Jesus said in John 6:44. Jesus points to this. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him. Do you hear this? That no one can come. The Christ is within, God's within you. That Christ within you, nothing can come to you. You can't attract anything unless there's that greater awareness, a greater consciousness within you attracts it. Right? Wow, that's your inner state, right? You're the Father. Your thoughts and feelings springing forth from you are electromagnetic realities in and of themselves, joining with other electromagnetic realities, right? So those thoughts and feelings about your SP, about what's going on, are realities in and of themselves, and you've been carrying those realities with you, those thoughts and feelings that's possible. Then what happened was they did join, they coalesced with other thoughts, feelings, and then that's what you perceived by you as events and conditions and objects in space and time, right? You saw the objects, you saw them, and you saw the events of them in space and time, right? Those thoughts and feelings you've been carrying, they joined together with other thoughts and feelings, and then boom, you saw them in 3D space and time. They're a cosmic event. They're essentially a cosmic event translated by you through your 3D senses, manifested reality. So you created that event, that manifested event. It was translated through your 3D senses into 3D reality. But again, that could have changed at any time. Because it's all through you. It's all through your thoughts and feelings and how you translate it while you're looking at it, right? Your inner experience is translated in terms of time, events and circumstances, in space, objects and things. Do you get it, guys? That's how you're a great translator, right, within you. That your consciousness, and you're translating that inner experience is translated in terms of time, events and circumstances, and objects and things, right? So let's unpack this a little bit more. And Neville says, the I am within you is glorified when your highest concept of yourself is manifested. Now, Neville talks about this idea of the concept of you, but he very often is pointing to the highest concept. What is he talking about here? He's talking about that concept of yourself, hear this, that's not influenced by those temporary, transitory thoughts and feelings and assumptions about yourself. Right? Those are transitory. Those are really influenced from the outer world than the inner world. The inner world, those inner assumptions, the core assumptions of who you are, is that highest ideal. And that's why he says the I am is glorified when your highest concept of yourself is manifested. Right? And then he says here, he quotes Isaiah, to give them beauty for ashes, that he may be glorified. That's what he was pointing to. Right? So you've got to give the beauty, so give them beauty for ashes, right? The ashes of your unwanted reality, seeing your SP with another guy, not having money, right? Or feeling broke, or struggling to pay your bills, or not getting the promotion, or things are not going good at work, or things are not going well at home, or you had a fight with friends, whatever that is, you give beauty for ashes by glorifying that higher concept of yourself, not getting swept away in those temporary, fleeting, and transitory thoughts and feelings that are really come from outside the 3D. They don't come from within, they come from out. Right? Well, you're saying, Tom, but I thought feelings are within. They are within, but but yours are influenced from what's going on in the outside world. You're not accessing those true core assumptions and beliefs and thoughts and feelings that who you really are. Right? Beneath your changing and transitory feelings and emotion is a feeling emotional state that is your unique highest concept of yourself. That's what Neville was pointing at. Right? In Seth and Jane Roberts, they call it a feeling tone. It's your core being. It's your beingness, right? It's your natural, loving, joyful tone of being. They call it a tone, right? And they also compare it to like a unique musical chord. It's your unique musical chord. It's your identity, right? That I am identity as your soul, right? That your personality as God, right? But your true personality, not the 3D personality that takes over. And we'll get to this in a minute, right? That 3D, that world self, or what we call ego. That's just a personality that takes over because it's influenced by outer events and not the true inner you. Do you hear this? Not your inner being, not who you really are. So that's the core from which your 3D reality emanates. And if not altered, hear this, by your transitory feelings and emotions with which you mostly identify, you would create that beauty. You would get, that's the beauty for ashes that Isaiah was, that's what Scripture was pointing about to. Right? That's what Neville's pointing to with the highest concept of yourself. That's the beauty we're talking about. Right? But we alter it with our temporary, fleeting feelings and emotions, right? That ego personality versus that greater personality of your soul, that part of God, that identity, right? You don't lose your identity. There's an identity of you behind that 3D personality that contains your 3D personality. Hear this, right? Your 3D personality is within that greater identity. Right? You're just letting it, but the 3D personality, think of the 3D you or the ego as your eyes to the outer world. It's the eyes of for your consciousness to see the outer world, right? But instead of just looking at the outer world and creating it from within, we're looking at it and having it influence us, and we're creating it from without. We're creating it based on what's going on in the outside world. Do you hear this? Wow, this is big. So let's break this down a little bit more. That inner essence is your individual divine expression of you as pure positive energy. That inner essence, that feeling tone that they talk about, that musical chord that Seth was talking about, that highest concept of yourself that Neville points out, that's your inner essence. That's your individual divine expression of that God energy. That's your divine expression, your individualized personality, an expression of God, of all that is, of source energy, right? That's what's showing so when people say, oh, he's really showing, or she's really showing her true colors, that's used as a negative connotation, but really, what are your true colors? If you could see your true colors, you would be in love with life, in love with yourself, because your true colors is that divine essence. That's who you really are. That's the broader, infinite emotional energy, hear this, out of which your experiences are created. It's the landscape or hue, right? So you have this beautiful landscape. This is the beauty for ashes that Isaiah was talking about. This is the higher concept that from which you create. But what happens? You smudge that hue, you darken that hue, you dim that hue by looking at the outside world, and then letting that outer identity, that 3D world you, shape your creations. Wow, that's big, right? You totally cover up that beautiful landscape, right? You know, if that larger you creates reality, what do you many times perceive as ashes, right? So if that larger you creates reality, why do you many times perceive ashes? Do you hear this? If this is true, if this broader landscape's who you really are, this high concept, why then does that larger you, if that larger you is in control, why do you many times perceive ashes instead of beauty? Why not give beauty for ashes, right? But you perceive ashes. That's why. And here's what it says from Seth and Jane Roberts. The ego is the eye through which the conscious mind perceives, or the focus through which it views physical reality. Wow, this is powerful. So the ego is not necessarily bad in itself. We always knock the ego around. But the ego are just the eyes through which consciousness sees. But what happens is we put the ego in control. How does the ego get in control? By looking at 3D reality and then letting it influence what it perceives and sees. Wow, that's big. Your ego, if left alone, those eyes of consciousness. Remember, when we talk about conscious mind, the conscious mind is part of that greater consciousness. So it's all the same consciousness. Right? It's drawing from the subconscious and the greater consciousness and the super consciousness, right? But the ego is the eye through which conscious mind perceives or focuses through and views 3D reality. And you would see beauty instead of ashes if you didn't look and expect or assume to see something that you didn't like and judge it. And then that becomes your perception, that becomes your reality. Do you see this? This is big today. Let's unpack this a little bit more. So you have this inner awareness, this greater consciousness, this inner perception of who you really are, that greater concept of yourself, that love, that joy, that pure energy, right? That feeling tone, that musical chord that's uniquely you. And it's beautiful. That's what the Scripture's talking about. That's the beauty Scripture's talking about. And remember, your conscious mind, it is turned outward towards the 3D world. So your conscious mind is simply part of that greater consciousness that's turned outward towards the 3D world. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to perceive it. So the conscious mind is great, and it's one with everything else. So there's no real separation here. We separate the past, present, and future, the conscious, the unconscious, and the ego. But there's no separation with all of that. It's all you. And it sees through these eyes, right? It's the conscious mind. That's what Jesus referred to as the door, right? I am the door. I am the way. That's the conscious mind turned outward towards 3D. Those are the eyes, right? The ego is the eyes of the conscious mind. The ego is only a portion of you. A very specialized portion of greater identity. This is what Seth and Jane Roberts talks about. It's just a portion of that greater identity. Hear this. It's just a portion of that highest concept of yourself that Neville talks about. Right? But because we focus specifically on the ego, we focus on the lowest concepts or lower concepts of ourselves. And that's what we end up creating. We're seeing through the eyes of ego. And you could very well see the highest concept of yourself through the eyes of ego if you didn't let 3D reality and what you see turn back on you. Do you hear that? Right? It's a very specialized portion of yourself. Inner perception creates outer perception. Your inner perception is beauty. And it will create an outer perception of beauty if not fogged or dimmed or covered by using your eyes to see ashes, looking at the 3D world and saying, oh, and again, it comes from your assumptions, right? So that's big, right? The conscious mind, remember, is not the ego. All is part of your greater consciousness, your inner awareness, all of it, right? And your conscious mind is not the same thing as your ego. Your conscious mind is part of that greater inner awareness. It's part of that greater consciousness. It's part of God. It goes all the way up to the top. To I am awareness, the conscious mind. The ego is simply a personality, part of that greater personality, part of that greater you, your greater soul, right? That's outward focused so you can see and operate in the 3D world. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to bang it out in the 3D world. Right? You wouldn't be able to see it. You wouldn't be able to be here. That's what the ego's for, but it's not to see ashes, it's to see beauty. Right? So through the conscious mind, the soul looks outward. Wow, I love this. This is from Seth and Jane Roberts. Left alone, hear this, it perceives clearly. Now let's really stay with this for a second. Through the conscious mind, through the door that Jesus talked about, The soul looks outward. Your soul, who you really are, that divine personality, that individualized part of God, that beauty, that love, that pure positive energy looks outward. And left alone, it perceives clearly, or in other words, it perceives the beauty. Or in other words, it only perceives the highest concept of yourself. Are you getting this, guys? This is so big today. So, consciousness is the door through which life reveals itself. This is what Neville says. So Neville talks about the door, right? Consciousness is the door through which life reveals itself. To do this, this is what Neville says, you must deny your present identity. And then he quotes the Bible in Mark 8:34. Let him deny himself. But here's the big thing. And a lot of you think denying is rejecting or it's a forceful thing. Here is where Neville defines what it is to deny the present concept of yourself. It's not about denying what is or denying present reality or denying your ego. It's none of that. You deny a thing by taking your attention away from it. Whoa! Hear this. Fits right in with our other lessons on attention. You deny a thing by taking your attention away from it, by withdrawing your attention, by retrieving your attention. Right? So that other identity, that present identity, that situation, that state, that ego personality that created an unwanted reality, you can simply deny it by removing your attention from it. That's what he's talking about. And then he says to drop a thing, and Neville really doesn't mention ego in his teachings. Hardly ever. He talks about the subconscious and the conscious mind, and he does refer to ego now and then, but not really because it's just a personality. It's part of that greater identity anyway. It's just the eyes through which consciousness sees. So to drop a thing, he says here, a problem or ego, he mentions ego here, from consciousness, you dwell upon God, God being I am. Wow. So he refers to the ego because generally that's how we define ego, as something unwanted, as something trying to give us control us to see things that we don't want, to create unwanted realities. But really, it's just a person. It's part of that greater personality of who you are, and it's only so you can look outward on the 3D world. It's us getting swept away in what we're looking at, and allowing those thoughts, feelings, and assumptions about that go inward. That again is projected outward again as your 3D world. That's how you kind of keep kicking the can forward, right? Whatever. So to drop a thing, a problem, from God, you dwell upon God being I am. In other words, you take your attention away from what you don't want. You take your attention away from that present identity and put it on what you want. Whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself. That was coming from Mark 8:34. That's what Jesus meant. Not to reject, not to try to get rid of yourself or get rid of your 3D ego. It's simply to turn your attention away from it. Guys, that's how your invisible assumptions create it all. I am your host, Tom Karen. This is the Be Something Wonderful studio of higher consciousness, where we help you level up and become the best version of yourself. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification button, like and share our videos. That's how we get our message out. Hit us up on Facebook at Be Something Wonderful. You can visit us on Instagram and Twitter at Tom Karen. You can visit our website at tomkaren.com, at besomethingwonderful.com, or write me anytime at info@besomethingwonderful.com. I always love to hear from you. Until next time, with great love and great light and infinite gratitude. See you soon.